Inside D&D, there are two wolves. And if you know the meme, one wolf is D&D, and the other wolf is D&D. So, D&D is D&D, and we're done. Great! But what if we take it seriously? Inside D&D, there are two wolves fighting each other. One I call Dungeon Crawl Mode, and the other I call Story Mode. Which one will win? Hi everybody, my name is Eloy or Umbromancer, and before we go any further, what even is this video? It is my attempt to communicate to you a lens through which I've come to view old school D&D. It is not the only lens. There are many and all of them are useful. This one I find particularly useful because it helps me understand a couple of things. What the development of D&D has been throughout the years, driving towards the current edition, 5e or 1D&D. It helps me to evaluate D&D-based systems and choose the ones that best suit my tastes and desires. It helps me to evaluate other people's house rules. It helps me homebrew and design D&D towards what I want it to be. So before we go any further, I would like to shout out CondorDM, specifically a video of his called Finding the Middle Ground, in which he addresses this topic. I'll link it below. Go watch. He makes nice, concise, short videos which convey a lot of good information. As an aside, I don't think this lens that I'm describing is anything new. Condor and many others who have played the game for some time have come to see it in a similar fashion, I think. Or at least they are aware of it. I myself am more interested in talking about the ideas, rules, and solutions to problems that I have come up with as a result of looking at the game through this lens. But because it has the key to my ideas, I felt I had to explain it first. So, what are these two wolves? They are two conflicting purposes or agendas which oppose each other. On one end, there is Dungeon Crawl Mode D&D, which is my clumsy shorthand way to describe a style of game which focuses on a mechanical simulation of a world. It is designed for and prioritizes the experience of going into a location full of monsters and treasure and trying to survive long enough to get away with that treasure. Its mechanics are interlocking and together create almost a board game, capable of being played with minimal, if any, roleplay, or any context or story elements within it. And this is not a dig at that style. I don't dislike either wolf. I actually like both of them. But bear with me for a while. The mechanisms of Dungeon Crawl Mode, movement rules, encumbrance, wandering monster tables, can be played with minimal story elements. This type of game is perhaps best exemplified by Molebay BX, which is the basis for Old School Essentials. It is a deadly game with disposable, easily replaced characters with no real expectation that they will live long or even survive the first encounter even. On the opposite end, we have Story Mode D&D, where the main focus is the desire to experience something akin to a fantasy novel, like Lord of the Rings or a movie. Setting, context, roleplay are important, and there is the expectation of protagonism, where your character has things like a backstory to establish their background, and that gaming experience will involve a story integral to the PC, usually on a personal level as well as a world level. There is the expectation of survival for the sake of seeing a story through to the end, usually involving an important climactic confrontation which resolves the tension of the story. In Old School, this is best exemplified by AD&D 1st Edition Dragonlance modules. They had a set of recurring characters which were expected to survive and level up in order to be able to experience the next module in the series until they reached their final climactic confrontation against the forces of evil in the 14th module of the series, thus concluding the War of the Lands. And now, here's the key. What the lens does is it helps you see that the two polar opposites represent the endpoints of a spectrum, and that you can play at different points in this spectrum. Like Condor said in his video, there is a middle ground. You just have to find it. So when you take it to absurd extremes, if you play pure dungeon crawl without any roleplay in it, you're basically playing a board game, like Dungeon, or Hero Quest, or Talisman, and things like that. But most of us are here to roleplay, so we move more towards the right side of the spectrum. Similarly, there is the apocryphal tale of the DM who has an entire novel in his head, with every outcome predetermined and set in stone, and the players are there just to provide dialogue and are firmly locked into the inescapable railroad. But nobody likes to play like this, and so we move a bit toward the left side of the spectrum. So once you see D&D through this lens, you can see that the desire to turn BX into a system that can better handle a story mode agenda like Dragonlance is one of the factors that led design towards a more story-focused 5e, with rules and mechanisms that support that agenda. With the lens, you can evaluate different systems. What is Alexander Macros's Adventurer Conqueror King system Imperial Imprint, or Axe 2, best suited for? It leans heavily toward dungeon crawl mode, but contains some mechanisms to inject context and survivability to the process, so I would place it here, near BX. But what about Jeffrey Talanian's Hyperborea 3rd edition? It contains changes to monsters and includes things like negative hit points, which make it skew more toward the story mode end of the spectrum, while still allowing full freedom from the railroad. Are you coming up with homebrew rules? Start by thinking about what your agenda is. Do you want to make the game more story mode or more dungeon crawl mode? Are you designing a dungeon? How many rooms should you put in it? Are you tracking encumbrance? Are you using wandering encounters, and if so, why or why not? If you remove a rule or add a rule, what effect does that have? This lens can give you the answers. We'll take a deeper look at these questions in upcoming videos, as this one is already way too long. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. I hope to make more videos talking about specific answers and specific rules and ideas that have come to mind as a result of following this method of viewing D&D through this lens. So thank you for watching. Oh, and inside D&D, there are two wolves fighting each other. Which one will win? The one you design for. Thank you very much.